So, actually, I was in New York when that happened, and I can tell you that was a very weird night. I was at graduate school at Columbia, and you knew something very bad had gone down, and it was really pretty. It was a pretty pressing time, I must say. So, if you think you're living in bad times now, as I told you previously in this class, you ain't seen nothing. This is good times by comparison. This is really good. There were some bad things 20, 30 years ago, and the elections were just as nasty, if not nastier, and people getting killed. You know, it was a very ugly time. I'm really pleased that the country has moved a little bit beyond it, though it seems to be slipping back. But what's your point?
Now, did they get the guys that assassinated him, or?
Well, let's hold that point a moment. They got the guys because nobody agrees on who was responsible. There were some not just intimations in the movie. I mean, Spike Lee was basically trying to say there was more going on here than met the eye, though I think Malcolm X's own family did blame some other people in the movement. I don't want to get into names, but I think you probably know who we're talking about. And there are some bad effects that came down even decades later when Malcolm X's wife was actually killed by, I think, one of his grandchildren who set a fire in the apartment, and Malcolm X's daughter wanted to settle scores with Mr. Farrakhan and things like that. There was some really ugly stuff going on even up till comparatively recently. But since everyone has deep feelings, particularly people in the Afro-American community, I think, about these things, I don't want to get on the wrong side of who's ever feeling thinks you know, they have something to contribute about that. Anyone want to contribute something on what they think happened? Who's knowledgeable? You seem to know something about things. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the U.S. government definitely had armament. I mean, there was COINTELPRO going on at that time, and there was Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, but they couldn't have done it without a lot of help within the movement itself.
Themselves, so yeah, they definitely had proxy lawyers and proxy.
I mean, it's the same as the Kennedy assassination.
So
I mean,
there was a conspiracy going on to lead to the assassination. So.
Well, there was lots of conspiracies going on at that time, and I'm not likening it all. I think, but I think that if you want an outsider's view, me, since you asked the question and you're curious about it, I don't think Spike Lee's take is completely accurate. I mean, I do think, now this is off the record. I don't want you guys telling me and going around the campus and telling other people what I say. This is a private comment since we're talking about this and not on the record. I'm not going to back it up if anyone ever asked me about it, but I think there were a lot of people being killed in this period by plots. Really bad. It was a bad time. And, I've argued with my children about all the jazz musicians that were killed in very odd ways. I mean, Morrison, for instance. What was his first name? The Doors?
Jim Morrison.
That was a very weird end that occurred there. And of course, we know the Black Panthers. A lot of people were killed among the Black Panthers. Presidential candidates running against Nixon, for instance, people like Wallace, you know, attempts were made and almost killed there to get rid of him in the election. Then Reagan himself was shot. You know, but to try to figure out who the conspirators were or whether it's just lone gunmen or crazies, Bobby Kennedy out here in Los Angeles. It was, Martin Luther King. I mean, you can just go right down the line. There were an awful lot. I think in Malcolm X's case, though, there was probably more internal contribution than a lot of those others, put it that way. I mean, they had a lot of people that they could, if there was a conspiracy, they had a lot of people that they could conspire with. And so again, I don't think that should be the prime. I mean, I do think in some of these other cases, John Lennon, You see, to think that there were people like John Lennon being killed, or look at Sirhan, for instance. I mean, to think that most people don't think Sirhan killed Bobby Kennedy. I mean, honestly, I don't think he did. He said, well, what do you mean? It was there. Oh, yeah, he was a diversion. That little pea shooter that he had couldn't kill anybody, and his bullets were all found in the walls, and the walls disappeared from the hotel. There was someone who was behind Kennedy who gave him a coup de grace. That was a mafia killing for sure, or a mafia government. Who knows who was with who, you know, in that time. It was a very ugly time. But as I said to my kids, if you notice, when J. Edgar Hoover left the FBI, things stopped. That was a very bad period of time for everybody concerned, blacks, whites, everybody, Afro-Americans and music people, anyone who was in the way. But to think that some of these people were part of a conspiracy, then you'd have to think of a Manchurian Candidate situation. I mean, because, I mean, there's people still in jail for different kinds of things who's supposed to have done something, and therefore they were involved in some way. Take the Lee R. Harvey Oswald thing. Certainly he was involved in some things, but was he the only one involved? I doubt it. And so, I mean, he himself said he was a patsy before he was taken away. And but to think that these people could be involved in these things, you understand what a Manchurian Candidate is? I mean, they had programs, and I don't know if they were successful or not, where they could implant. How many have seen the Bourne Conspiracy, or what were those movies called? The Bourne Identity. I mean, those series of movies, and I think they're pretty good movies actually, hinge on that he's got something planted in him that makes him do things that he might not otherwise do. I don't know if they succeeded in doing that or they didn't. But let me tell you, it was an ugly, 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 horrible, tragic, really sad time. Let's go back to Malcolm X here. On the Malcolm X thing, I had some students once who were in my classes, and they left and they weren't doing so well, and they went down to San Diego and they started a business down there. And it was a kind of an express mail business, and apparently they had worked for one of the other ones, like FedEx, or I forget what different names of things. And they had all the names of lists of the clients of the previous company. So with the lists of the clients of the previous company they worked with, they started their own company and went to all these people and undercut their parent company. And then they were surprised. They came to me, we were driven out of business. Some people in the parent company really got ugly and hit us with lawsuits and threats, and finally we lost all of our business. What's the point? Malcolm X, with all due respect, he was in Elijah Muhammad's movement. He was really cutting into the turf of his parent founder. He would, it's very difficult to, particularly a movement like the Black Muslims, to go in there and then try to sort of siphon off a whole group of supporters from the previous leader. People don't take that very kindly. And, it's competition for turf in a certain way, and I think there was a lot of ill feeling. That's what I'm trying to say to you. That they had a lot of cooperation, whoever was involved. And I don't doubt that the government of the United States at that time, maybe not the big government, although we know people like Johnson, Nixon, there's a lot of questions about, recently there was a television program where Johnson was accused of being involved in the Kennedy assassination. How many saw that, the men who killed Kennedy? I saw that program. It was on the History Channel. It actually was a very convincing presentation, and they pulled it. They pulled it because the Johnson family protested and all these other people jumped on them and so on. But they had stuff on that program, eyewitness accounts, mistresses of Johnson, things like that, that were so like mind-boggling that it made you really think. So again, whether it's official or unofficial, or whether it's a rump CIA group or whatever, whether the Kennedy people were involved in a blowback or something, it was a really nasty time. And Malcolm X, I think, knew he was in the sights of somebody, and you know, but I think it was as much internal and as external. And the tragedy of his family thereafter, his wife's fate, which is really ugly. She was burned to death, and his I guess his daughter, who was trying to get a contract, supposedly, whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, on Farrakhan or those people, I don't know. So it was a very ugly period, and I don't think we'll ever know the truth about it. But to get to the movie, Spike Lee really does, it's almost hero worship, isn't it? So, again, I've never seen a good movie like that made about Martin Luther King. In fact, you know, maybe Martin Luther King didn't inspire that kind of loyalty and adulation. But, you know, I think in the Martin Luther King case, you can really say the government, that was an FBI or some secret wing of somebody who was involved in that. That was clearly a conspiracy, and a very ugly one at that. So there was a lot of people that were done in, unfortunately, as worse or as even more tragic than Malcolm X, but I haven't seen any hero worship movie done about him. That's not to say that he doesn't deserve his. I just wonder what Spike Lee is trying to prove here. Yeah.
What happened to the movement after Malcolm X was assassinated? You know, is there still a presence of black Muslims?
Oh, sure. I mean, they had a million-man march in Washington recently. Didn't you see that about 3 or 4 years, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? They had a million-man march led by Louis Farrakhan as the leader now. We have people on this campus who are representatives of the Black Muslim movement. It's a very strong movement still, but there was a split there within the leadership, and I think a lot of it had to do, as the movie implied, with pan-Islam, that people like Malcolm X found out that there was a greater Islam in which to participate with, and I honestly think that he saw a lot of economic potential in that there was a lot of, let's face it, Saudi oil money and other rich Middle Eastern oil countries that would be willing to give money to somebody who represented Orthodox Islam and not sort of like more of a sectarian cult, sort of Christian Islamic mixture that sort of Elijah Muhammad from an earlier generation. Even his name, Elijah, shows a Christian slant to it to some extent, represented. So I think Malcolm was also a very good entrepreneur, and he saw the economic potential of moving into mainstream Islam, whether it was a really sincere, conscious-driven thing or not. It's up to you to decide. But yeah, there still is a growing Black Muslim movement. I think it's maybe not as strong as it was back then, but I think what the Black Muslim movement represented, I think, was really healthy among Afro-American communities. They were the first ones to say, let's do it ourselves. Let's have our own businesses. Let's not go to Whitey and ask for help. Let's build ourselves up. Let's have Afro-American business. Let's have Afro-American neighborhoods policing themselves. Let's not, you know, depend on the outer culture. And I think that idea of self-help is the only way any community can finally progress to a sense of real pride and dignity, which is what they were trying to encourage. So I think their goals were, personally, I think were extremely admirable in many ways. And if you met people from the Black Muslim movement back in those days, I mean, they would always be perfectly dressed, absolutely, totally polite, extremely, you know, well-behaved and so on like that. And I think that's the way in America to move forward. That may be a Uncle Tom way, but it's something a lot of us don't realize, that every one of us is an Uncle Tom. I mean, look at me. Look at how I dress. I got button-down things. I got khaki pants, you know. Hey, you don't think I'd like to have earrings hanging down from my head, or you know, or dreads, or don't think I'd like to come here in a toga or something like that? You know, or tattoos all over me. I mean, you know, do you think I'm going to get tenure like that? I mean, I might if people are generous, but I'm going to have a lot more trouble. So we all conform. That's part of America, you know, part of the modern world. I'm sure Europeans, look at them. They're all conforming. Every parliament in Europe is dressed, everyone's got a tie on, look at, you know, tie and jacket. So I think the Black Muslim movement understood that. It wasn't a sin to conform. If you look at the Afro-American culture in Harlem back in the 10s, 20s of the 1900s, you see some of the classiest looking people you can imagine. I mean, hey, you know, I've seen the pictures of old Harlem with people walking on these streets there. They are, you know, extremely well dressed, very, you know, well behaved. You didn't see the situation that you presently might see in some of the neighborhoods that you might visit. And I don't think that the nationalist movement has necessarily improved the situation because they've argued against, to some extent, assimilation. I'm not saying you should, that's up to every individual person. So, you asked the question, are they as strong as they were? No, I don't think they are, but I think a lot of people have gotten the message that, you know, basketball heroes like Magic Johnson and all these sort of people know that you have to plow the money back into the community. You have to have, you know, investment on the part of the leaders of the community themselves, the people. You can't just make your money and then leave. You got to go back in and you got to start your own businesses, and that's what that's the world we live in. It may not be the best world, but that's what entrepreneurship, small business capitalism is, and anyone who's willing to participate in that, whether you're Korean, Japanese, Afro-American, Bulgarian, Russian, Slavic, Jewish, Muslim, whatever you are, you're going to progress in the United States. As long as you're willing to do that. I don't think it's not fun, but not. Tomorrow, next time, bring your James Baldwin. He's going to criticize Malcolm X and the Black Muslims. And we'll see what he thinks of them at that time.